Join thousands of NFT traders who already start their day on CryptoSlam.
Millions of crypto dollars pour into Ukraine as Russia attacks the country. Is this a sign of rising dominance of cryptocurrencies? With global financial sanctions piling up, will crypto exchanges follow suit?
Exchanges into this is understandable, but for exchanges to get involved is extremely complicated. For many people, crypto is a lifeline. Our traders are mostly small traders. We can't find a justification to target them.
And what's next for SWIFT? All that and more coming up on this special edition of Word on the Block. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced from their homes, families torn apart as rockets rain down. Pleas for help, sanctions and support finally flowing in. This, in brief, describe what the people of Ukraine are going through. At least 12 countries have now joined a new wave of sanctions on Russia, with some Russian banks cut off from international banking network SWIFT. The ruble has devalued against the US dollar by over 30% in the past 5 days, and the humanitarian crisis at the borders of Ukraine is mounting. In what has become the first global conflict in the age of cryptocurrency, we're now seeing just how the technology behind it is not only funding battles on the ground and aiding those who have been left with no access to banks due to sanctions, but it is also precedent and history in the making. Welcome to Word on the Block, the series that takes a deeper dive into blockchain and all the emerging technologies that shape our world at the intersection of business, politics, and economy. It's what we cover right here on Forkast News. I'm Editor-in-Chief Angie Lau. And today we bring you a special edition with prominent voices from the crypto world to discuss its critical role in this conflict. First, we are joined now by Ben Caselin, Head of Research and Strategy at crypto exchange AAX. And he joins in as we stand at the cusp of geopolitics and crypto. Good to see you, Ben.
Hi, Angie. Thank you so much. It's been a while.
I want to dive in right away. It is intensifying, this geopolitical tension, this conflict that's mounting in Ukraine, obviously, and it's coming to a head. And we are seeing accessibility, security, privacy, and transparency, just a few benefits of cryptocurrencies here, and they have never been more important than they are right now. So as we watch from all over the world, people from different pockets of the world can actually join forces to donate to Ukraine and its people during this terrible conflict. We're seeing crypto donations to the country have hit now $20 million US and counting. What are we seeing right now, in your view? Is it unprecedented? Is it history in the making? How is crypto playing a role here?
Actually, the way I would look at it, and first and foremost, as we talk about crypto in these times, even as we see a price surge, it is nothing to be bullish about, nor to necessarily rejoice at this time. But what we can see is over time, and not necessarily only now, we see, the interweaving of crypto and politics at various levels. We look at the situation in Canada, where we saw a movement with truckers that also solicited Bitcoin donations. Like, these things have happened before, many years ago as well, during protests in various countries, including Nigeria. But of course, the scale is different, and the type of attention it's getting is very significant at this point.
And it really feels like a matter of life and death, which for many people it is. And this takes on a whole new level. It is critical for a lot of people to be able to access resources. So how do you do that? And for the first time, as you've said, we're starting to see the emergence of cryptocurrency really playing a role in supporting sides. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it is by design. The nature, the whole premise that at least Bitcoin was built on. It is the idea that it is a permissionless network that is open, that is apolitical, that is agnostic to the reality on the ground, but that kind of supports the sovereign individual and the ability for people to hold their own wealth, for it to be portable, for it to send it across borders. It's like voting with capital, and for the Ukrainian government to solicit donations in Bitcoin and Ethereum opens up, the gateway is there, the rails are there, and they cannot be destroyed because this network is strong. And so that is one kind of manifestation that we see in these days. We hear stories of people that are able to kind of, maybe prior to the invasion or slightly after the invasion happened, were able to transfer some of their funds into Bitcoin and maybe other cryptocurrencies such as USDT, which makes it more portable to bring your wealth with you. We've seen this in other wars as well, but then it was in the form of jewelry and gold and these types of valuable assets. So we're not seeing something new. We're just seeing the upgraded version of it. And now, what Bitcoin represents and what cryptocurrency represent, the various protocols that are accessible to anybody, is that, we share that common value. We share that network. And if something happens in Ukraine, we can all respond quite directly. But we see other use cases as well, also in Russia. And, in that sense, Bitcoin doesn't really choose a side. It's just part of the process now.
Well, to your point, Asia is no stranger to conflict. Its history is peppered with movements of wide swaths of people evacuating areas in times of conflict. And to your point, it was jewelry, it was money. And much of it had to be left behind because it was hard to flee with your wealth. And of course, if you do bring it, you become a mark. There are probably lots of countries in Asia where, families of history have tried to hide their wealth. Now, today, this can be transported digitally in crypto, and you bring up Russia. This is also the other side of the story. The Russian central bank has also nearly doubled its key interest rate to 20% as the ruble tumbled on sanctions and penalties. How do you see this playing out on crypto use in Russia as people look out for safety and liquidity for individual Russians to actually try to conserve and reserve and preserve their wealth?
Sure. Well, in the weeks leading up to the invasion, we'd already heard various kind of messages coming from Russia's central bank around Bitcoin and these types of, the potential for regulation and stuff. And that was remarkable and not necessarily in the positive sense. And the connection to SWIFT is not very far-fetched already then. But maybe instead of looking at it from a kind of evasion type of perspective, ordinary people in Russia have been moving their money into crypto, and particularly Bitcoin or some stable coins. And it tells us something about, not necessarily that people know it's a store of wealth. People know that. It is accessible. People are looking for a store of wealth. There's many types, and this is very accessible. That's a reality on the ground. What it means for companies that are currently being sanctioned, there may be some speculation that they could potentially do trade with Bitcoin. Of course, they can trade rocks with each other. They can drive trucks to one another full of goods. There's all types of things you can do. The question is, and perhaps that's the most important point, this is a culture in crypto where we celebrate permissionlessness, and we celebrate the openness of the network, and we celebrate that freedom that comes with it. But it's similar to freedom of speech. And so we should also push for a culture of accountability and for a culture of responsibility. And so, yes, you may be able to do business with a sanctioned company and exchange Bitcoin, but should you? Or not. And that moral question is then no longer imposed by you by a central authority in this case, but is a determination that you have to make yourself. And that's something that crypto stands for. And so, the emphasis on individuality comes out in many different ways, as well as just ordinary people living in the UK or in Hong Kong that hold crypto. What they want to do with that is their choice, and they have to make that choice in the correct way.
And we're seeing it. We are seeing it in an unprecedented move. Select Russian banks have been barred from SWIFT. This is a global payment network, as you know, in which more than half of Russia's financial systems actually participate in. This will likely cripple the country's access to financial and settlement with trade partners and really upend their global connectivity. Is crypto going to step in here? What is the role that crypto is going to play?
Well, this is very difficult because crypto is in a sense, it is just a commodity that doesn't really have any agency, right? And so what various project owners do I mean, crypto would then also have to include central bank digital currencies and all these types of rails. So really, it's an infrastructure question. If Russian companies and sanctioned individuals, log on or onboard onto new networks, that's what they do. But once again, eventually trade comes down to trade between people, and that's where people need to be very cautious. So to say where's crypto going with this is a bit difficult because it really depends on what people are going to do with their crypto. Where's money going to flow to? But for ordinary people in Russia that are holding on to Bitcoin, they're not trading. Bitcoin is not a thing that you want to trade when you're either fleeing from war, or whether you're incredibly afraid of kind of hyperinflation or something like that. We've seen that in Venezuela. This is not a futures trader's heaven. Bitcoin matters, and the whole cryptocurrency market lives off of that, and it's always done that. And what we're really seeing today, and I think that's maybe also the significance of your question, is that question itself is something we need to think about, and to think that we have this tool now, we have this new innovation. Is it just for trading? Is it just something we talk about for investment, or are we going to see the kind of the humanitarian dimensions of it and the economic implications? And there may be some changes to the way. Right now, I guess the sanctions are harsh and effective, and they really have an effect. But as the industry, not just the industry, but as all these financial sectors evolve, that may not be the case in 20, 30 years. And so we're going to have to rely on different mechanisms. And this is all something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, Ben, there have been frozen accounts, freezing of assets. There's also been reports of Russian citizens unable to use digital payment systems like Apple Pay or Google Pay. How do you see this impacting crypto usage on the ground in Russia, the individual access to digital payments?
Well, it's unimpeded, of course. So generally, if you have a Bitcoin wallet or like a decentralized wallet, or you're participating on a DEX somewhere with your MetaMask, it's unimpeded, and that is also, that's by design, right? That's how it works. But when it comes to kind of centralized exchanges, I think people have to understand that while there is a culture that's perhaps even a bit anti-sanction culture in the crypto community as a base, as an exchange, you do form part. You have a team structure. Even if you're self-regulated, you have to abide by the regulation that does apply to you and the law. And so these things, all exchanges will be paying attention to. But for PayPal and Apple, they ride the rails that are controlled. And these protocols, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin, they don't ride those same rails.
And I want to ask you about those crypto exchanges. It's one that Ukrainian government has asked crypto exchanges, more specifically, if everyone from Binance, Coinbase, Huobi, among others, to block Russian users. Are you doing that? Are you blocking Russian users? How do you feel about being asked to actively block customers with a Russian nationality?
Well, I mean, it's an understandable request, and of course we've looked at what the exchanges around us are saying as well. But it's a pretty unified and it's the same answer everywhere, which is the sanctions apply to Russian systems, and the people that may find a disadvantage from that are the ordinary people. But no, even though no government is targeting the ordinary people, it is a byproduct, and the hope is that people become disgruntled, that they perhaps rise up to their governments in discontent. It's to drag exchanges into this is understandable, but for exchanges to get involved is extremely complicated. Exchanges already operate on a very gray area. The user base is in the hundreds of millions across countries. AX, just like other exchanges, we have Ukrainian users, we have Russian users, we have Ukrainians living in Russia, we have Russians living in Ukraine. These are our user base, and currently their leaders, and especially on the part of Russia, Russia has invaded Ukraine. This is the situation. And for us, we know that for many people, crypto is a lifeline. Our traders are mostly small traders. These are people that trade a little bit, that hold some Bitcoin. They live in various cities across these regions. We can't find a justification to target them specifically. We are not the one to decide on sanctions. If we find that certain accounts in our exchange don't check up against these global watch lists, and of course we take action, but that's normal. That's everyday business. So that's as far as we can go at this moment. This is the way we look at it at the moment.
And finally, Ben, you are a holder of Bitcoin. We are seeing the markets react in real time as they try to preserve and conserve their value. But then also, how do you hedge in this kind of macro environment? How do you regard gold? We're seeing money flow into safe havens. How do you regard Bitcoin? Do you still think Bitcoin is a safe haven as we watch this conflict unfold?
Absolutely. The problem is that Bitcoin is also a speculative asset. And the problem is that it is also something people like to trade with leverage. But in essence, Bitcoin is a safe haven asset. Yes, it is a safe haven for the people that actually will benefit from that. And, where the kind of hedge funds stand and the kind of macro investors, that may take longer. But for sure, for somebody running away from bombardments, it is a safe haven, more so than anything else. In the monetary sphere of life, of course.
Ben Caselin, thank you so much for your insights. That's Ben Caselin of AAX. All right, time for a quick breather. But when we return, we're going to get the views from Adrian Brink of Anoma. Barred from SWIFT, what does this mean for the antiquated financial system?
It's a system that is ancient at this point, and comes with all the characteristics that you sort of imagine that antiquated systems have.
And what role is DeFi playing in crypto donations flowing into Ukraine? When Word on the Block returns.
Forkast News is your gateway to all things blockchain, breaking down and breaking through the noise with the people who know it best and why it matters. We go to where the action is, from Asia to the world. Forkast is the most reliable source of intellectual discourse and insight that informs, educates, and bridges the gap between the blockchain industry and the mainstream. The future is being built, and Forkast has it covered. This is Forkast News.
Welcome back. Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine has invoked a number of economic sanctions and penalties. Some of the biggest Russian banks have been barred from the SWIFT system, a system which some 300 Russian financial institutions depend upon. Earlier, Forkast's Mega Chata caught up with Anoma Protocol's Adrian Brink to get his views on the unfolding situation and what this all could mean for the future of crypto.
Adrian, you've been quite vocal in your views of SWIFT being an antiquated system. However, Russia's exclusion from the global financial system hit the ruble hard as the Russian currency plunged 30% against the US dollar to record lows. So it clearly seems to be having an impact here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, SWIFT is still the predominant system for global money transfer. What I mean by antiquated is it is a system that is ancient at this point, and comes with all the characteristics that you sort of imagine that antiquated systems have. But of course, at the moment, it is still a very important tool to move money around.
Now, subsequently, Adrian, the announcement of US sanctions led to a sharp jump in Bitcoin prices. We've also seen crypto donations pouring into Ukraine. Now, this is the first conflict in the age of digital currencies. And the prominence of crypto underlines the importance of disintermediation, would you say?
I think so to some extent, actually, because this is, for the very first time, we're very much turning the financial system into a weapon of choice for nation states. And this is actually without me taking a specific view on this conflict at this point, but it's more that we're now weaponizing the financial system, which even resulted in things like Ukrainians losing access to their banking infrastructure because the US enforced sanctions against the eastern part of Ukraine, which then resulted in American services just suspending services for all Ukrainians, right? I think global conflict highlights the need for sovereign financial systems much more than before. Because even if you link it back to something that happened in Canada, right, with the protesters' bank accounts being blocked, it seems that governments are very willing nowadays to start going after the financial infrastructure first to deal with things that they don't like. And of course, if you are on the end dishing it out, this is great. But if you end up on the end receiving it, this is very bad for you. And I think we shouldn't assume that we're always on the end dishing it out and not receiving it. So I think everyone should be preparing for a future where they may get rightfully or unrightfully targeted and have to figure out what a sovereign financial system looks like to them. And I think also as a result, you've seen quite a bit of interest in Bitcoin and generally like decentralized currencies for pretty much the same reason.
This conflict really is bringing the tussle between the centralized and decentralized systems to the fore. The fact that centralized systems, the systems that are based on fiat, are trying to control digital currencies. We just saw Ukraine ask crypto exchanges to bar Russian users from their platforms. We also saw Elizabeth Warren tweeting about cryptocurrencies, how they're possibly undermining the power of sanctions. So there are a couple questions that I have here. The first one is it possible for exchanges to actually bar someone from their crypto holdings? And secondly, more importantly, is the question of financial sovereignty. Does the act of trying to sanction cryptocurrencies undermine that financial sovereignty?
So absolutely, it's possible for exchanges to ban individuals. They've done this in the past. They can always do this. If you hold your assets with an exchange, you have the same risk model as if you hold your assets with a bank. That institution can fail. That institution can revoke your access. They can do arbitrary things. I think it's probably a very bad precedent if we start banning every citizen's access to financial systems as soon as countries start doing bad things, because it seems like a blanket ban on the civilian population that is in no way justified. So I'm personally very much against blanket banning people's access, also on the exchange side, because I think it creates a lot of collateral damage that doesn't really have any useful outcome. Like it doesn't do anything to improve the situation except make like 140 million people's lives way harder. And on the notion of sanctions, I think Elizabeth Warren specifically, she is in favor. She is tweeting about the fact that crypto may be used to undermine sanctions in order to gain brownie points on Twitter and gain votes in the next election. Realistically, this is not a concern that I think anyone that actually understands how cryptocurrencies or how the financial systems work has, because the volumes that the Russian government would need to move are just tremendously large, and there's still better options than cryptocurrencies in the existing financial system.
Well, this crisis has certainly brought cryptocurrencies to the center stage as those caught in the crossfire look to protect and access their money. Adrian Brink, thanks so much for your insight.
Up next, an exclusive insight into what drove Trippy Labs to set up Ukraine DAO when Word on the Block returns.
Forkast News is your gateway to all things blockchain, breaking down and breaking through the noise with the people who know it best and why it matters. The future is being built, and Forkast has it covered. This is Forkast News.
Welcome back. Earlier this week, I spoke with Kelvin Lam, CEO of Lithium Finance, to discuss how the unfolding humanitarian crisis in Eastern Europe, sanctions from the West, and Russia's unraveling economic situation will all play out in crypto. Really important story, so we really appreciate you being here. We've got NATO and the West both imposing sanctions on the Russian state and billionaires backing Vladimir Putin. So we know this. But will these penalties really be able to work on assets held in crypto and those held or traded on decentralized exchanges?
First type of these sanctions prohibit primarily banks and financial institutions from facilitating transactions as well as dealing in capital markets in relation to major Russian banks and corporates. While they're very, very powerful, I think that crypto themselves are not directly concerned. The second type of sanctions, however, are broader, more general sanctions that practically requires anyone in control of these sanctioned persons' assets to block their access. Now, authorities have indicated in the past that these sanctions apply to crypto just like any other asset. Now, as far as decentralized protocols are concerned, I think enforcement will likely be harder as these are argued to be without any central authority. It is, however, unclear if people or organizations involved in these decentralized protocols would be considered broadly, again, as being in control. Now, and then with that, they would be held to the same obligations to uphold these sanctions. Obviously, again, if these wallet addresses remain anonymous, enforcement will likely be very, very difficult. We know, however, that authorities have already maintained and published a list of all the wallet addresses associated with sanctioned persons. Ukraine has interestingly also just launched a program offering bounty to identify these addresses. So I think it would be very interesting to see how sanctions would play out in the situation.
It's absolutely fascinating to watch how this technology, how crypto is really being assessed here in this conflict. Now, the West has banded together to ban select key Russian banks from the SWIFT network. This would significantly impact the Russian economy. How could this ban impact the decentralized financial systems in operation right now? Would this even be a bigger push for DeFi?
It's been reported that Russians are restoring foreign currencies just over these past few days in fear of collapse of the local currency. I'd speculate that Russians on a personal level would be using more and more crypto to move and hold assets internationally. However, I think industry experts generally believe it's unlikely for the nation and institutions to turn to digital assets for general trade and finance, as it just hasn't yet been a commercially practical solution just yet. Having said that, however, I think it's been reported also that Washington is considering to expand sanctions to directly restrict Russia's access to digital assets. Now, the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, for example, published already a guidance to encourage exchanges, miners, wallet providers, and practically everyone in the crypto space to implement some form of sanction compliance program. And I believe we might be seeing more and more proactive encouragements from the authorities in this situation.
And we're also watching crypto donations flowing into Ukraine right now. A Ukraine DAO has also been set up. What role do you see DeFi playing in gathering and deploying funds in a war-impacted zone?
We're definitely seeing more and more charitable organizations embrace and accept crypto donations. In an armed conflict situation like this, you will have banks, infrastructure and international intermediaries becoming unreliable. And even with that, crypto always remains to be a viable channel. For example, we've seen a Ukrainian NGO been blocked by one of its payment platforms to accept donations as the conflict escalates. But that NGO has been able to continue receiving donations, through Bitcoins and other crypto assets amounting to over $7 million as we speak. That would probably be impossible with certain other donation channels. Now, I believe we will be seeing more and more of these crypto donations in similar situations. They're just, really easy and inexpensive to set up. They are internationally accessible, very, very easy for cross-border donations. And they, most important of all, are highly reliable, even in a stable situation like that.
It's incredible to watch this play out in real time. That was Kelvin Lam of Lithium Finance, whom I spoke with earlier this week. And now crypto is playing another critical role on the ground in Ukraine. Trippy Labs has created Ukraine DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization that is working to support Ukrainian civilians who have joined military efforts. Forkast News was able to get a one-on-one via social media and find out a little bit more about these efforts. And Trippy Labs told us that all funds, 100% of it, will go to the initiative Come Back Alive and used to distribute food and medical supplies to local efforts to help residents under siege. Why a DAO? The team said, we don't have time for traditional means of fundraising, and crypto has already proven to be the most efficient tool to offer immediate help. And that's really what we're talking about here. This is in the age of cryptocurrency and the use of technology, how it is reshaping the front lines of a conflict. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this latest episode of Word on the Block. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief of Forkast. Until the next time.